Hey everybody, I hope you're having a great day or evening no matter where you are in this world right now. Want to say thank you. We're at 19,800 subscribers, so hopefully by the weekend we will hit 20,000. And also want to remind you that you can join the channel now for just 99 cents a month. That's an eBuzz Central membership. The MVP, VIP, and Pro versions of the memberships are gradually being weeded out, and all of those perks are going to transfer over to the 99-cent level membership. It's a great way to support the channel and a great way to support content you like. Now, I want to go back here. A little over a month ago, I did a video that was Microsoft was caught stealing open source code. I had a lot of input on this. I had a lot of people fill my comments up with, that's typical Microsoft. But then I had some people that come up and said, how can you steal open source code? Well, let's go over this real quick. Even though the code is open source, you have to give attribution to the developer and to the license. Even though it's open source, you can't just go willy-nilly and use it without giving that attribution. And I don't think people understand that. Even though it's open source, it still has a license. Now, what I want to do real quick, let me switch over here. And I want to give you a quick update on the lawsuit that's been brought against Microsoft, GitHub, and OpenAI. And most importantly, I'm going to give you some information here that if you have code that is on GitHub, suggestions for you to protect your code. Now, I do want to say, the video I just previously spoke about, I will clip it at the end of this video, so if you haven't seen the original video, you can go ahead and watch it, as opposed to having to go out and find it. But it states right here, and this is in mid-December, Microsoft, GitHub, and OpenAI, accused of software piracy, sued for $9 billion in damages. The class action lawsuit seems to be a pushback against Microsoft, GitHub, and OpenAI's creation that allegedly doesn't pay the open source community their due and harms it in the process. Programmer cum lawyer Matthew Broderick is claiming damages to the tune of $9 billion from Microsoft, GitHub, and OpenAI in a lawsuit against the three companies over copyright issues and the use of open source code with restrictive licenses to train GitHub Copilot. Released as a technical preview in mid-2021, GitHub Copilot, Microsoft's latest attempt at developing a program code synthesizer, is now turning into a major legal headache. In June 2021, GitHub assessed that OpenAI's AI Codex-based text-to-code conversion tool would reproduce only 0.1% of the code. A few months down the line, research by academics from New York University discovered that GitHub Copilot produces buggy code laden with vulnerabilities as much as 40% of the time because of billions of lines of unfiltered open source code and natural language it was trained on. However, the class action lawsuit filed by Matthew Broderick on behalf of possibly millions of GitHub users contends the legality of GitHub Copilot not for reproducing code copies or security issues, but for violating licensing terms. GitHub Copilot was designed to streamline software development by enabling developers with relevant artificial intelligence-generated code suggestions as and when they type the code. Meanwhile, the code is trained on is licensed under the MIT license, GPL, Boost Software license, BSL2, Eclipse Public License, Mozilla Public License, and the Apache license, and others. Litigants claim that Microsoft, GitHub, and OpenAI ingested and distributed licensed material, i.e. the training code, without appropriate attribution, copyright notice, or adherence to licensing terms. As such, the AI programmer Viz.Dot, a tool that works alongside a programmer that revises each line of code, didn't provide the necessary attribution or a copy of the license it was released under. An example cited under the class action lawsuit includes that of Tim Davis, a Texas A&M computer science professor. He discovered several times that Copilot reproduced code without attributing it to him, which is required under the license agreement. In June 2022, Copilot had 1.2 million users. If only 1% of the users have ever received output based on licensed material, and only once each, defendants have only breached plaintiffs and the class's licenses 12,000 times, the class action lawsuit reads. However, each time Copilot outputs licensed materials without attribution, the copyright notice or the license term it violates the DMCA 3 times. Thus, even using this extreme underestimate, Copilot has only violated the DMCA 36,000 times. Suppose that same is applied to all 1.2 million users. In that case, the lawsuit estimates that distributing licensed code without attribution, copyright notice, and license terms, the damage claim is as much as $9 billion. If each user receives just one output that violates Section 1202 throughout their time using Copilot, up to the 15 months for the earliest adopters, then GitHub and OpenAI have violated the DMCA 3.6 million times, at a minimum statutory damage of $2,500 per violation. Now let me say something right here. That $2,500 per violation goes for open source code as well. If you don't follow the licensing agreement and you don't attribute the code to who it's supposed to be attributed to, you can be fined. That translates to $9 billion, the litigant stated. Besides open source licenses and DMCA 1202, which forbids the removal of copyright management information, the lawsuit alleges violation of GitHub's terms of service and privacy policies, the California Consumer Privacy Act, and other laws. The suit is on 12 counts: violation of the DMCA, breach of contract, tortious interference, fraud, false designation of origin, unjust enrichment, unfair competition, violation of Privacy Act, negligence, civil conspiracy, and declaratory relief. After Copilot was out of the technical preview in June 2022, GitHub competitor FOSS.com spoke with IP lawyer Kate Downing, who concluded that GitHub is not committing copyright infringement if the code that Copilot is trained on is hosted on GitHub. If not, a lack of legal precedence means this would have to play out in a court of law. Additionally, Downing suggested that any Copilot-generated code or suggested derivative of training code that comes under the purview of any of these licenses mentioned above would have to be looked at on a case-to-case basis. The class action lawsuit seems to be pushback against Microsoft, GitHub, and OpenAI's creation that allegedly doesn't pay the open source community their due and harms it in the process. It goes on to delineate Microsoft's history of dismal licensing practices, actions against open source software, engagements in vaporware, FUD, which is fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and other business practices all the way back to the DOS days. Microsoft strived to reposition itself as a company that loves open source. Post Satya Nadella taking over as CEO, the tech giant acquired GitHub for $7.5 billion in 2018, the year it became the largest Git hosting service. Future AI products may represent a bold and innovative step forward. GitHub, Copilot, OpenAI, Codex, however, do not, the lawsuit adds. Defendants have made no attempt to comply with the open source licenses that are attached to much of their training data. Instead, they have pretended those licenses don't exist and trained Codex and Copilot to do the same. By simultaneously violating the open source licenses of tens of thousands, possibly millions of software developers, defendants have accomplished software piracy on an unprecedented scale. Alex Chapman, former AI programmer at Rockstar Games, founder of Creative AI, and current event director for Nuclear AI conference at AIGameDev.com, stated the litigation to be a solid piece of work. My assessment is that the defendants, GitHub, Microsoft, and OpenAI, are in a very bad position. Drew DeVault, the creator of the Git repository host SourceHut and several other projects, wrote on his blog in June 2022, GitHub Copilot is a bad idea as designed. It represents a flagrant disregard of the FOSS licensing in and of itself, and it enables similar disregard, deliberate or otherwise, among its users. I hope they will heed my suggestions, and I hope that my words to free software community offer some concrete ways to move forward with this problem. His suggestions, including allowing GitHub users to opt out of their repositories from being used in Copilot's training or output model, informing users of Copilot of their obligation to attribute the original code developers, eliminating copyright left code unless the output model is treated as free, or compensating original developers with a portion of Copilot's charges. Now, if you are hosting code on GitHub, at this moment in time, I would definitely opt out of your repositories being able to be swept and used by Copilot. This also puts into perspective the deep concerns the open source community may have for GitHub Copilot. The walled garden of Copilot is anti-ethical and poisonous to open source, writes Butterick. It's therefore also a betrayal of everything GitHub stood for before being acquired by Microsoft. If you were born before 2005, you remember that GitHub built its reputation on its goodies for open source developers and fostering the community. Copilot, by contrast, is the multiverse of madness inversion of this idea. Microsoft's previous ventures into AI-driven programming include the failed Robust Fill and Deepcoder. Copilot is its most successful one yet. In June 2022, Amazon also launched its own AI-paired programming tool, Code Whisperer. Google maintains its presence in the area through its subsidiary, DeepMind's AlphaCode. The only difference between Copilot and AlphaCode is that the former suggests code, while the latter generates it from scratch. Now, I know that's a lot to listen to, and it was probably kind of boring, but what you've got to understand here is if you have open source code, if you're familiar with open source code, you must understand that there has to be an attribution made. There has to be a license followed. Even though it's open source, I suggest everybody in the open community, everybody watching my channel right now, please keep your eye on this because this is going to be a big deal in the open source community. If Microsoft, GitHub, and OpenAI are allowed to take open source code and not have to give attribution to the developer or to the license, this is going to be a big turning point in the FOSS community. So keep your eyes on that. Like I stated earlier, if you have not seen my original video, I'm getting ready to clip it right after this one, so enjoy it. Now, those of you who are familiar with my channel know that I focus mainly on open source and Linux. And sometimes I will make videos that touch on things that we all agree on, which is Microsoft. Microsoft must be stopped. Microsoft is a cancer. I did one earlier in the year that said Microsoft can kiss my you-know-what. But I come across some information I think I want to share with you because I think it's very, very important to us as an open source community, and especially to the thousands and thousands of developers out there that trust a platform with your code and pray that it doesn't get stolen or misused. Now, when I say that, we know open source code is open. Everybody can use it. You load your development up on GitHub, you keep us updated, you show us changes, but at the same time, we know we have to respect the general license of that code, that if we use it, we have to share it with others. Well, Microsoft is at it again. Now, to just touch base on a little bit of history, most of us are familiar with GitHub. A lot of the things that we use, a lot of the development that we see gets done on GitHub. I don't know how many times I'll go look at something and it'll say, hey, go check out our GitHub page, and we'll go over and check it out. That's where the developer does most of their work. What GitHub is, in and of itself, is an internet hosting service for software development and version control using Git. It provides the distributed version control of Git plus access control, bug tracking, software feature requests, task management, continuous integration. It's really a great tool. It's something that I believe for open source developers is probably priceless. You can go there and keep everything under one controlled area and be able to make the changes and keep people up to date and abreast of things that are going on with it. There was only one problem. On June 4th, 2018, Microsoft bought it. And this was the news release they sent out. Microsoft acquired GitHub, a popular code repository service used by many developers and large companies, for $7.5 billion in stock. The deal, which heightened Microsoft's focus on open source development, aimed to increase enterprise use of GitHub and bring Microsoft's developer tools and services to new audiences. Now, when I read this originally, when it said it heightened Microsoft's focus on open source development, I called BS. Because my first thing was, Microsoft is going to go in, they're going to find open source code that's better than their own code, and they're going to utilize it. But then I also thought to myself, well, they can't. They have to actually use the GNU licensing or something. Something's going to protect that code. It has to. There's no way Microsoft can blatantly go in and just steal code and use it if it's better than their code and get away with it. That's what I thought. at the time. But what if Microsoft isn't the one stealing the code? What if Microsoft isn't the one utilizing the code? So then what would we be looking at? We wouldn't be looking at somebody actually going in and going, hey, this code is better than ours, let's use it. What is a way around that? What is a way that we can steal the code, but at the same time not be stealing the code, but then we can use it if we don't get caught? Well, I got the answer to that. Everybody say hi to OpenAI. OpenAI is a great tool. It's a tool that can go in and look through code and create things and pretty much do everything that you want it to do. Artificial intelligence has come a long way, and it just keeps getting more and more, shall we say, scary. And when I say scary, I mean, what are we really utilizing artificial intelligence for? Are we using it to better the world? Are we using it to make jobs easier? Or are we just going to use it the way most people use new technology? You can remember when the internet first came out. The internet first came out, it was a great tool. But immediately you're going to have the underbelly of people who want to come out and find a way to use the internet for their gain, for their financial gain, for their professional gain. They're going to find a way to utilize any new tool for the wrong. That's my personal opinion. If you disagree with me, put it in the comments below. Just like GitHub. GitHub years ago was a great place for developers to go and set everything up. Now that it's owned by Microsoft, it really has become a development platform for end-to-end security and automation of tools and pushing an enterprise feel. What does that mean to us? Doesn't really mean anything, but they're pushing that enterprise. That's what Microsoft does. We're going to push that enterprise. But what if we partner with OpenAI? What can we do then? Well, here's the answer to that, guys. Microsoft, GitHub, and OpenAI are being sued for allegedly violating copyright law by reproducing open source code by using the AI. So, Microsoft isn't stealing the code, but the AI can steal it, and the AI can utilize it. But here's the big deal. This suit could be a huge impact on the wider world of artificial intelligence. Now, we're just going to read a few things here. Microsoft, its subsidiary GitHub, and its business partner OpenAI, business partner, see, they're working together, have been targeted in a proposed class action lawsuit alleging that the company's creation of AI-powered coding assistant GitHub Copilot relies on software piracy on an unprecedented scale. Now, this was what I was worried about back in 2018 when Microsoft bought GitHub, that they were just going to eat up good code and they were going to reproduce it and make it their own and pretty much cut all developers out. But Microsoft didn't do it. Microsoft used AI to do it. The case is only in its earliest stages, but could have a huge effect on the broader world of AI, where companies are making fortunes training software on copyrighted, protected data. Copilot, which was unveiled by Microsoft-owned GitHub in June of 2021, is trained on public repositories of code scraped from the web, many of which are published with licenses that require anyone reusing the code to credit its creators. Copilot has been found to regurgitate long sections of licensed code without providing credit, prompting this lawsuit that accuses companies of violating copyright law on a massive scale. We are challenging the legality of GitHub Copilot, said programmer lawyer Matthew Butterick, who filed the lawsuit with help of San Francisco-based Joseph Saveri law firm in a press statement. This is the first step in what will be a long journey. As far as we know, this is the first class action case in the U.S. challenging the training and output of AI systems. It will not be the last. AI systems are not exempt from the law. Those who create and operate these systems must remain accountable. Now, this is what they're going to try to fight in court, because they're going to say, well, the AI created it. We didn't take it. We didn't steal it, but the AI used it. They're going to find a way to ease themselves in and out of this without having any repercussions. Now, if we scroll down a little bit, it said the lawsuit, which was filed last Friday, is in its early stages. In particular, the court has not certified the proposed class of programmers who have allegedly been harmed. But Butterick and Manfredi and Zipparoli of the Joseph Saveri law firm said they expect the case to have an impact on the wider world of generative AI. Microsoft and OpenAI are far from alone in scraping copyrighted material from the web to train AI systems for profit. Many text-to-image AI, like the open-source program Stable Diffusion, were created in exactly the same way. So what this is saying is everybody's doing it, AI is doing it, but because AI is doing it, nobody should be held accountable. And if you come down some more, you can actually read some interviews. What I'll do is I'm going to link this Verge article in my description below, because I think a lot of this information needs to be put out there. What I'm bringing to everybody's attention is that we use GitHub, Microsoft owns GitHub, and GitHub is quickly becoming an unsafe place if you want your code protected. If you disagree with that, please let me know in the comments below. But like I've said in the past, Microsoft has to be stopped. Whether they're using themselves, whether they're using AI, whatever they're using to basically steal code needs to be stopped. Do me a favor before you leave today. Please like the channel. Likes keep me in YouTube's algorithm, which means if you found the information in this video helpful, somebody else out there might as well. And subscribe. Doesn't cost anything. And if you end up not liking me, you can always unsubscribe. You also can become a member right here on YouTube for just 99 cents a month. But that's not all. We are also on Utreon, which you can become a member on at $2.99 a month, or Odyssey, which is $4 a month. You can also buy us a cup of coffee, maybe zip on over to PayPal and throw us a donation, or go over to Patreon and become a patron to the channel. All those links will be in the description below. As always, thank you for watching my video, and I will see you in the next video.